Marcus Johnson had always believed he had built the perfect life. At 38, he was a successful real estate mogul in Atlanta, living in a sprawling mansion with a beautiful young wife named Sophia, now pregnant with their first child. To friends, colleagues, and the media, Marcus was the embodiment of the American dream: handsome, wealthy, powerful. But all of that glitter collapsed on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. That day, Marcus came home earlier than usual. After a tense meeting downtown, he decided to cut the day short and surprise Sophia. His sleek black sports car rolled quietly along the tree-lined driveway, tires humming on the stone pavement. From the outside, the mansion was flawless: lush lawns, a perfect white fence, windows gleaming with the late sun. But the moment Marcus stepped inside, a strange stillness made him pause. There was no music playing in the living room, no television murmuring in the background, not even the faint bustle of staff moving through the house. Only the sound of his own heartbeat and the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway. He set his briefcase down on the polished wood floor, loosened his tie, and took a few careful steps forward. A heavy unease creeping into his chest. On the sofa lay a silk scarf, violet with tiny embroidered edges. Marcus picked it up, lifting it to his nose. It carried the familiar scent of vanilla and cardamom. Sophia's scent. For a brief moment he smiled, but then he noticed how the fabric had been twisted and crushed, like someone had been gripping it too tightly. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He quickened his steps toward the nursery at the end of the hall. The door creaked open, and Marcus froze. Sophia was sitting on the floor beside the unfinished crib, one hand resting over her belly, the other covering her face. Her shoulders trembled with quiet sobs. "My love," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. She startled, hastily brushing away tears. But the makeup on her face couldn't hide the shadow of a fresh bruise along her cheekbone. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, reaching for her hand. Her fingers were icy, stiff, trembling. And then, with a voice hoarse from crying, she asked the words that shattered him. "Am I ugly? Am I just a monkey? Do I even belong in your world?" Marcus's chest caved. Each question stabbed deeper than any betrayal in business. He was a man used to contracts, negotiations, billion-dollar risks, but in that moment, he felt powerless. The woman carrying his child, the love of his life, was broken enough to believe those words. "Who told you this?" he demanded softly. But Sophia only shook her head, whispering, "It's nothing. I slipped. It's just an accident." The lie was too rehearsed. Marcus clenched his jaw. He wanted to press her, but her eyes full of fear begged him not to. Through the open window, faint voices drifted in from the garden. Two house staff whispered to each other, "She doesn't smile like she used to. Careful. The old lady comes too often. People will notice." Marcus's blood turned to ice. The old lady. His thoughts leapt immediately to his mother, Eleanor Johnson, the formidable matriarch who had never hidden her disdain for his marriage to a black woman. At their wedding, her look of contempt had been sharper than the sound of champagne glasses clinking. He had hoped time would soften her, but deep down, Marcus knew better. He gently lifted Sophia onto the bed. She turned away from him, curling toward the wall. He sat beside her, his hands gripping the armrest until the leather creaked. Then his eyes rose to the corner of the ceiling. There, a small red light blinked, the lens of a security camera he had installed months earlier. He had thought of it only as protection from burglars. But now Marcus wondered what those silent eyes had witnessed while he was gone. The room was heavy with silence, but inside Marcus, something was hardening. He knew this was not an accident. Something or someone was poisoning the air inside his perfect home. And for the first time, Marcus realized this would not go away on its own. From the outside, the Johnson mansion was the very picture of elegance. White columns rose tall against the fading light. Manicured lawns stretched endlessly, and every detail spoke of wealth and permanence. To the neighbors, it was the home of a man who had everything. But inside, the silence was suffocating. Marcus walked slowly through the hall, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. He glanced at the family portraits lining the walls, his father in his tailored suit, Eleanor with her perfect pearls, Marcus himself in graduation robes. They were images of pride, of lineage, of a legacy built on success. But none of those photographs included Sophia. His mother had refused to pose with her. "This marriage will not last long enough for pictures," Eleanor had said once, her words slicing through Marcus like glass. Now, as Marcus looked at those smiling faces, he felt only the weight of absence. The house, for all its grandeur, was lifeless. No laughter, no warmth, no sign of joy, and the emptiness seemed to follow Sophia like a shadow. She moved through rooms as if she were a guest rather than a wife. At breakfast, she buttered toast but never ate it. At night, she turned toward the wall, her breathing shallow, as though she feared even sleep might betray her. Marcus noticed the way her hand lingered on her belly, not only in protection, but in silent reassurance that she and the child still belonged here. The staff saw it too, though they never spoke openly. One morning, as Marcus sipped coffee at the kitchen counter, he caught the faintest murmur from the garden. To gardeners, trimming the hedges, their voices low but urgent, "Madam used to laugh out here. It's been weeks. She looks different. Hush, don't say it too loud. You know who comes by too often." Marcus set his cup down with a sharp clink. He didn't need them to finish the sentence. He already knew Eleanor Johnson, his mother, the iron matriarch of Atlanta society. To the outside world, she was refined, charitable, untouchable. But Marcus knew the truth. She had never accepted Sophia. She had never forgiven him for marrying a black woman on their wedding day. Eleanor's smile had been brittle, her congratulations forced, and ever since, her visits had carried the sharpness of inspection, as if Sophia were a stain to be scrubbed out of the family name. But Marcus had dismissed it as stubbornness, as pride. He had told himself his mother might soften once the baby arrived. Now, looking at the bruises Sophia tried so desperately to hide, Marcus felt sick at his own denial. That evening, Sophia prepared dinner quietly, her movements slow, cautious. When the butter knife grazed the tender skin of her wrist, she flinched ever so slightly. Marcus noticed it, and his chest tightened. She tried to mask it with a quick smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Did you sleep last night?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Will you rest after dinner?" Another nod. Her answers were rehearsed, like lines memorized in front of a mirror. Marcus closed his laptop with a sharp snap. The sound made Sophia jump. He wanted to demand the truth, to press until she broke down and told him everything. But instead, he simply studied her, memorizing the small tremors in her hands, the way her shoulders curled inward. Every gesture screamed of someone living in fear. Later, in his study, Marcus paced the room. His eyes settled on the black monitor in the corner, the hub of his security system. He had installed cameras months ago, telling himself it was for protection. He hadn't thought much of them since, but now the thought gnawed at him. What had those cameras seen while he was gone? He hesitated, hands braced on the desk. If he pressed play, he might uncover something he could never unsee. But the image of Sophia's tear-streaked face and her whispered words, "Am I a monkey?" echoed in his mind. Slowly, he typed in the code and pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, dividing into small windows: the foyer, the staircase, the kitchen, the nursery hall. At first, it was nothing unusual. The housekeeper carrying laundry, a delivery at the gate, sunlight crawling across the marble floor. But Marcus fast-forwarded, his eyes scanning every corner, waiting for something to break the pattern dot, and then, at 3:12 p.m., the kitchen camera caught movement. The back door opened, and Eleanor Johnson walked in. Perfect posture, pearl earrings glinting, her expression calm, practiced. She moved as though she owned every inch of the house because in her mind, she did. Marcus leaned forward, his throat tightening. At first, the interaction seemed civil. Sophia offered tea, her smile tentative. Eleanor responded with a cool nod. But as the seconds ticked by, their body language shifted. Eleanor's chin tilted downward, her gaze sharp and condescending. Sophia's shoulders hunched, her eyes dropping to the floor. Then the mask slipped. Eleanor's lips curled, though there was no audio. Marcus could read the words as clearly as if they were shouted. "You don't belong here." Sophia pressed her hand to her belly, steadying herself like someone bracing against turbulence. Eleanor's hand shot out, gripping her arm, shoving her back against the counter. Sophia flinched, her face twisting in pain. Marcus's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. He rewound the footage, played it slower, forcing himself to absorb every detail even as his stomach churned. The video rolled on. Eleanor in the nursery doorway, staring at the crib as though it were a crime scene. Eleanor blocking Sophia's path with a chair, lips shaping sentences that looked like a verdict. And then a slap. Swift, unceremonious. Sophia steadied herself on the counter, blinking rapidly, swallowing back whatever cry tried to escape. Outside the study door, Marcus heard the soft shuffle of housekeepers passing. Their voices floated faintly. "She's covering her cheek again. I saw the bruise. I wish he'd notice. He's always working. Maybe today." Marcus froze, the words cutting deeper than any blade. He had noticed, and now he could never turn away. He stared at the paused frame on the monitor, his mother's hand midair. Sophia braced against the counter and felt a cold heaviness settle in his chest. This was no rumor, no misunderstanding. It was abuse, and it had been happening under his own roof. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt powerless in front of Eleanor. She had always dominated rooms with her presence, turned anger into theater, manipulated with tears and outrage. If he confronted her now, she would deny, deflect, destroy. But if he waited, if he prepared, if he gathered proof too undeniable to twist, the truth would stand by itself. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers to the bridge of his nose, breathing deeply as though steadying a plane through turbulence. When he opened them again, his decision was carved into stone. He would not scream. He would not accuse. He would set a trap so airtight that not even Eleanor Johnson could wriggle free. For Sophia, for their unborn child, for the air inside this house to finally be safe again. The night stretched long inside the Johnson mansion. Though Marcus hardly moved from his study chair, the monitor glowed in the corner, spilling cold light across his face as hours of footage slid by. He didn't want to watch, but he forced himself. Each clip carved into him deeper and deeper, until his anger was no longer a flame, but a heavy stone lodged in his chest. The next day's recordings played back much the same. The silver sedan pulled smoothly into the driveway, and Eleanor stepped out immaculate as ever. Pearls at her neck, hair coiled tight, expression controlled, almost regal. She didn't ring the bell. She never rang. She carried her own key, the symbol of ownership she refused to surrender. Marcus leaned closer. Jaw set, Sophia greeted her cautiously in the kitchen. She wore a soft cardigan, her hair tied back, her belly prominent now beneath her dress. She offered tea with trembling hands. Eleanor didn't thank her. Instead, she set down her bag on the marble counter with a thud, like claiming territory. On the screen, Marcus saw the moment the conversation shifted. Sophia tried to smile, but Eleanor's body stiffened, her chin tilting at that familiar, cruel angle. The words shaped on her lips were unmistakable. "You'll never be one of us." Sophia's shoulders curled inward. She clasped her stomach, as if shielding the life inside her. Eleanor closed the distance, her fingers stabbing the air like a blade. Again, there was no audio, but Marcus didn't need it. He could read his mother's mouth. "You are dirt. You are beneath us. You don't belong." Then, the shove. Eleanor's manicured hand gripped Sophia's arm, shoving her against the counter. Sophia flinched hard, the pain evident in the twist of her face. Marcus slammed his palm against the desk, the crack of skin on wood echoing through the empty study. He rewound, played it again, and again. He needed to be sure. He needed it burned into his mind so there would be no doubt when the time came. But the footage didn't stop there. Hours later, another camera caught Eleanor in the nursery, standing over the crib that wasn't yet finished. Her arms folded, her gaze like a sentence passed down by a judge. She moved a chair deliberately, blocking the doorway when Sophia tried to pass. Her lips shaped words Marcus didn't want to imagine. And then the slap, a brutal, dismissive crack of her hand across Sophia's cheek. Sophia staggered, blinked fast, swallowed hard. She didn't cry, not out loud. She just endured. Marcus paused the frame, leaning back in his chair. His body shook, not with rage, but with something cold to resolve. He could hear the whispers of the housekeepers again outside the door. "She's covering her cheek again. I saw the bruise." I wish he'd notice. I notice now, Marcus thought bitterly. And I will not stay silent. He pressed play again, letting the footage roll. Another day. Another visit. The pattern was clear, systematic, escalating. This wasn't a what-I'm outburst. It was a campaign. Eleanor wasn't just humiliating Sophia. She was trying to break her, trying to drive her out before the child was born. Marcus rubbed his eyes, exhaustion cutting deep. But he couldn't stop. The more he watched, the more a plan crystallized. He couldn't storm in and accuse her. Eleanor would turn the confrontation into theater tears, denial, righteous outrage. She had done it before, to others. He knew her tactics well, but cameras didn't lie. And so, a plan formed. Not with adrenaline, but with patience. He would make space for the truth to reveal itself. He would not interfere until there was no escape, no excuse, no possibility of denial. The next morning, Marcus rose before dawn. He lay in bed a moment longer, listening to Sophia's breathing, shallow, uneven, interrupted by small tremors in her sleep. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, kissed her temple softly, then slipped out of bed. By 8 o'clock, he dressed in his usual tailored suit. He kissed Sophia's forehead at the door, murmuring something about back-to-back meetings in the city. She nodded, her eyes tired. She didn't question him. The staff saw him leave. The tires of his black car crunched down the gravel driveway. The gates closed behind him with their familiar metallic clang. To the house, to Sophia, to Eleanor, it looked as though Marcus had gone for the day. But just around the corner, under the wide shade of an oak tree, Marcus parked. He powered up his tablet, its screen glowing with a grid of live feeds. Every room, every angle, every wordless cruelty now caught with both video and audio. He leaned forward, his jaw tight. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the device. He wasn't sure if it was fear or fury. Perhaps both. Time stretched painfully, every minute dragging like an hour. The gardeners trimmed hedges. A maid carried linens up the stairs. The world inside the house moved with artificial calm, until, finally, the silver sedan appeared at the edge of the driveway. Marcus's breath caught. His mother's car rolled smoothly forward, polished and deliberate. Eleanor stepped out, dressed in ivory, pearls catching the light. She didn't even look around. She didn't have to. She believed herself untouchable. She walked inside with her key, her heels tapping a steady rhythm across the marble. Sophia was in the kitchen, pouring tea. Even on the muted feed, Marcus saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook as she set the cup down. Eleanor's figure entered the frame, her shadow stretching long across the tiles. She spoke sharp, bitter. The words didn't matter. The venom in her posture said enough. Marcus leaned closer, his breath shallow. On screen, the teacup shattered against the floor, porcelain scattering like bones. Sophia bent down quickly to gather the shards, but Eleanor grabbed her by the arm, yanking her upright. Sophia's face contorted in pain, one hand flying to her stomach as she tried to steady herself. Marcus's vision blurred red. He wanted to burst through the door now, end it here, but he forced himself to stay still. He needed Eleanor to reveal everything, her cruelty, her rage, her intent. Then, Eleanor's hand reached toward the knife block on the counter. Her fingers curled around the steel handle, lifting it slowly, deliberately, as though weighing not just the blade, but the legacy it could sever. Marcus's chest clenched. His pulse hammered in his ears. This was it, the line crossed, the final proof. He didn't think. He didn't wait. He slammed his car door shut, his footsteps pounding up the driveway, every muscle coiled and ready. The front door slammed open with a force that shook the quiet calm of the mansion. Marcus's voice cut through the air like a crack of thunder. Enough. Both women froze. On the kitchen feed, Eleanor's hand hovered midair, the knife gleaming under the light. Sophia stumbled back against the counter, one arm shielding her belly, her eyes wide and wet with terror. Eleanor turned slowly, shock flickering across her face, not guilt, not shame, but the pure astonishment of being caught. Marcus advanced one step at a time, his shoulders squared, his eyes burning. Every word, every bruise, every moment, he said, his voice low and steady. All of it is recorded. Do you see that red light above you? It's been watching you the whole time. Eleanor's hand trembled. The knife slipped from her grip, clattering against the marble counter before rolling to stillness. For a fleeting second, her mask cracked, rage flickered, fear bled through. Marcus moved past her without breaking stride. He reached Sophia, wrapping an arm protectively around her trembling frame. Her head buried against his chest, her sobs breaking free at last. He whispered, "You're safe. I swear it. You're safe now." But his eyes never left his mother. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Marcus stood between the two women, the woman who had given him life, and the woman carrying his future, and in that silence, a decision hardened inside him. He would not let blood excuse cruelty. He would not let legacy shield hate. Outside, faint at first, then growing, came the wail of sirens. Blue and red lights painted the tall windows as tires crunched over gravel. Eleanor's composure faltered. Her pearls hung crooked around her neck, her skin pale beneath the makeup. Still, she tried. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and spoke in a voice lined with ice. "You would choose her over your own mother." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I would choose my wife. I would choose my child. I would choose love over hate every time." The kitchen filled with the sharp slam of car doors. Footsteps echoed through the marble halls, and two officers appeared in the doorway, their presence heavy, their voices calm but firm. "Sir." "Ma'am, we received a report." Marcus held out his tablet. The screen played the footage, Eleanor's shove, the slap, the venom etched in her posture. The officers watched in silence, their expressions hardening as the evidence rolled on. When the clip ended, there was no hesitation. "Mum," one officer said evenly, "please place your hands behind your back." Eleanor's mouth opened, but no words came. Her eyes darted between her son, his arm wrapped protectively around Sophia, and the officers now stepping closer. For the first time in her life, she had no script, no theater to turn to, only the cold weight of reality. The cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sound ricocheted off the marble walls like gunfire. Neighbors had already gathered at the gates, their whispers curling like smoke. "So it's true," one woman murmured. "All those bruises weren't accidents." Another shook her head slowly. "Money doesn't clean everything. Not this time." Eleanor was led past them, her polished shoes sinking into the gravel, her once commanding figure reduced to a pale shadow under flashing lights. Inside, Marcus guided Sophia gently to a chair near the wall. She clung to his sleeve, her breathing ragged. He knelt before her, locking his gaze with hers. "You're safe now. I swear it," he repeated, his voice cracking not from weakness, but from the weight of what it meant. Sophia's fingers gripped his hand tightly, as if anchoring herself to the promise. For the first time in weeks, her eyes met his not with fear, but with the faint spark of relief. Behind them, the house was no longer silent. It hummed with the footsteps of officers, the static of radios, the murmurs of staff finally free to speak. But none of it mattered to Marcus. His world, his entire focus, was right there in front of him, his wife, their child, the family he had chosen to fight for. When the door finally closed behind Eleanor, the air seemed to shift, not lighter, not yet but no longer poisoned. The weight of her presence was gone. The battle wasn't over. Courtrooms and headlines still lay ahead, but the war inside his home had finally reached its turning point. Marcus pressed his forehead gently against Sophia's, his words a vow carried on a whisper. "Love will be stronger than legacy, stronger than hate. From this day forward, I promise you that." And for the first time in a long time, Sophia allowed herself to believe it. The flashing lights lingered long after Eleanor had been taken away. Blue and red beams danced across the walls of the Johnson estate, staining the once pristine white columns with the colors of shame. Outside the gates, neighbors huddled in small knots, whispering and pointing, their faces a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and grim satisfaction. Marcus closed the door, shutting out the murmurs, shutting out the spectacle. The house was quiet again, though not the suffocating silence of before. Now it was the stunned hush of a storm that had finally broken. Sophia sat in the kitchen, still trembling. Her eyes were swollen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as if she were holding herself together piece by fragile piece. Marcus knelt in front of her, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. His voice cracked, and he let it. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you." Sophia shook her head, whispering, "You did. You came back. You stopped her." Marcus kissed her hand, but the guilt in his chest didn't ease. He had been blind for too long, busy with empires and boardrooms while his own home rotted from within. He vowed silently that he would never let silence blind him again. That night, they barely slept. The mansion no longer felt like a trap, but it didn't feel safe either, not yet. Sophia startled at every creak of the floor, every shift of wind rattling the shutters. Marcus stayed awake beside her, his arm wrapped firmly around her shoulders. His eyes fixed on the ceiling. By morning, the news had already spread. Headlines blared across television screens and phone notifications. Atlanta philanthropist arrested in domestic abuse scandal. Johnson matriarch accused of attacking pregnant daughter-in-law. Eleanor's name, once synonymous with charity galas and high society, was now etched into police reports and mugshots. Marcus's phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from reporters, from lawyers, from family friends desperate for details. He ignored most of them, answering only those that required his immediate attention. His focus stayed on Sophia, ensuring she ate, ensuring she rested, ensuring she knew he was there. When he finally stepped outside to breathe, he found a cluster of neighbors lingering at the edge of the driveway. They didn't shout, they didn't accuse, they simply watched him with a mixture of pity and relief, as if the truth had confirmed what they had long suspected. One older woman, Mrs. Coleman from across the street, approached cautiously. We wondered," she said softly. "We saw the bruises. We heard the whispers. We didn't know how to help." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "You know now, and I'll make sure she never suffers again." Mrs. Coleman squeezed his hand. "Good man, don't let her down." Inside, Sophia was curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When Marcus returned, she lifted her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, there was no fear in them, only exhaustion, and the faintest flicker of hope. Days turned into weeks. Eleanor's name appeared in court schedules and medical reports. Her lawyer tried to spin the story, claiming stress, claiming misunderstanding, but the footage was undeniable. Every shove, every slap, every poisonous word had been captured in cold, unblinking clarity. The court of public opinion was just as ruthless. Social media burned with outrage. Community groups condemned her. Former friends quietly distanced themselves. For Marcus, the hardest part wasn't the noise outside, but the silence within. He didn't visit Eleanor. He didn't return her calls from county jail. For the first time in his life, he severed the tie of blood and chose to stand apart. It hurt, but it was necessary. Some bonds, he realized, were too toxic to salvage. Sophia began to heal in small, careful steps. She walked through the garden again, pausing to touch the roses she had once avoided. She laughed softly when the maid's child toddled through the hall, a sound Marcus hadn't heard in months. Each smile, each laugh, each moment was a victory, proof that the darkness was receding. One afternoon, Marcus found her in the nursery. Sunlight spilled across the polished floorboards, illuminating the crib they had finally finished together. Sophia's hand rested over her belly, feeling the faint kicks of life stirring within. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "Do you think he'll ever understand?" she asked. Marcus stepped forward, placing a hand over hers. "Our child will grow up knowing love, not hate. He'll know the truth, not the lies people try to wrap around legacy. And he'll know that his mother is the bravest woman I've ever known." Sophia's lips trembled into a smile, and she leaned into his embrace, for the first time in a long time. The air in the house didn't feel heavy. It felt alive again. That night, as they sat together, Marcus reflected on the strange paradox of his life. He had spent years chasing success, wealth, prestige, but in the end, his greatest battle had not been fought in boardrooms or contracts. It had been here, in his own home, against his own blood. And the victory wasn't measured in money or power, but in the safety of the woman he loved and the life they had created together. He kissed Sophia's forehead as she drifted into sleep. The storm had not fully passed. The court dates still loomed. The headlines would still sting, but for the first time, he felt peace. The war inside his walls was over. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and tension. Every seat was filled, from journalists scribbling furiously to curious onlookers who had followed the scandal. Since the night of Eleanor Johnson's arrest, cameras weren't allowed inside, but Marcus knew the public would dissect every word, every gesture. He sat beside Sophia, their hands intertwined beneath the table. She was calm but pale, her belly prominent now with the nearing due date. The whispers around them were like a low tide, constant and restless. Marcus ignored them. His focus was on the front of the room, on the woman who had once commanded his entire world. Eleanor entered with her lawyer, still dressed in pearls, still holding herself as if the ground itself owed her deference. But the mask was thinner now. There were lines beneath her eyes that no makeup could hide, a stiffness in her walk that betrayed the weight of disgrace. When the charges were read, domestic assault, endangerment of a pregnant woman, hate crimes under state law, Marcus saw her flinch just once. She recovered quickly, but the tremor was there, proof that even Eleanor Johnson could bleed. The prosecution wasted no time. They displayed the footage Marcus had guarded so carefully, the shove in the kitchen, the slap in the nursery, the venom twisted into Eleanor's face as she spat silent insults. Each clip played out in front of the jury, in front of the community, stripping away every layer of denial she might have worn. The room shifted with each video. Gasps, shakes of the head. Sophia turned her face away at one point, tears slipping down her cheeks, and Marcus squeezed her hand. He kept his eyes on his mother, forcing her to confront what she had done. Eleanor's lawyer tried to spin the narrative. He spoke of stress, of misinterpretation, of a mother who only wanted the best for her son. He painted Sophia as fragile, overly sensitive, misreading discipline as cruelty. But the evidence was a wall he could not scale. The recordings showed everything: the bruises, the threats, the cold malice in Eleanor's eyes. At one point, Eleanor herself took the stand. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and tried to summon the commanding presence she once wielded with ease. But her voice trembled when she spoke. "I did what I thought was right," she said. "I wanted to protect my son, protect our family name. This woman doesn't belong." The judge cut her off sharply. "Mrs. Johnson, you will not use this courtroom to further demean the victim." The words landed like a slap, and for the first time, Eleanor's confidence fractured. When Sophia testified, the room fell silent. Her voice was soft but unwavering as she recounted the weeks of torment, the whispers, the bruises, the constant reminder that she was unwelcome in her own home. She did not embellish. She did not dramatize. She simply told the truth, and the truth was damning enough. Marcus sat rigid, every muscle tight, fighting the urge to leap up and shield her from the stares. But Sophia's strength held the room. Even Eleanor looked away, unable or unwilling to meet her gaze. The trial lasted weeks, each day peeling back another layer of Eleanor's polished facade. Reporters outside chronicled the fall of a woman once considered untouchable. Socialites who had once clung to her circle now avoided her name like a contagion. The Johnson legacy, once gilded, was now a cautionary tale whispered at charity galas. For Marcus, the hardest moment came not in court, but in the quiet of the courthouse hallway. Eleanor was led past him in handcuffs, her face pale, her eyes burning with something between fury and desperation. For the briefest second, their gazes locked. "You're my son," she hissed. "How could you betray me like this?" Marcus's voice was steady, colder than he ever thought possible. "You betrayed yourself. You betrayed this family the moment you raised your hand against her." He turned away before she could answer, guiding Sophia gently out into the sunlight. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. Eleanor Johnson was sentenced 2 years in prison, her empire of reputation collapsing in an instant. The press called it the fall of a matriarch. Marcus called it justice still. Justice was not the same as peace. At home, the scars lingered. Sophia still flinched at sudden noises. Marcus still woke at night, jaw clenched, replaying the footage in his mind. But slowly, carefully, the air inside the mansion grew lighter. The staff no longer whispered in corners. The gardeners hummed again while trimming the hedges. The rooms once heavy with tension now echoed with softer sounds, the rustle of pages. As Sophia read in the nursery, the faint hum of lullabies she practiced for the baby. One evening, Marcus stood in that same nursery, watching Sophia place a folded blanket into the crib. The setting sun painted the walls gold. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine the future, a baby's laugh filling the halls, Sophia's smile lighting up the kitchen, a home no longer ruled by silence and fear. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his hands gently over her belly. "We're free now," he whispered. Sophia leaned back against him, her eyes closing. "Yes," she breathed. Free, but Marcus knew freedom came with a cost. He had severed blood ties that once defined him. He had chosen love over legacy, truth over silence. And though the world outside still judged, still whispered, he didn't care. He had made the only choice that mattered. That night, as he lay beside Sophia, Marcus realized something profound. Wealth, power, reputation, they were fragile, easily shattered. But love, when fought for, was enduring. And he would fight for it every day. For Sophia, for their child, for the family he chose to build. Not the one he was born into. The war was over. The healing had begun. Weeks bled into months, and the world outside moved on. Headlines shifted to new scandals, fresh tragedies. Eleanor Johnson's name, once on every society page, now lived only in court schedules and prison rosters. Her empire of influence had crumbled into dust. For Marcus, it was as if she had vanished entirely, leaving only the faint echo of a storm that had once rattled his home. Inside the mansion, life slowly rewrote itself. The air was lighter now, no longer heavy with fear. Curtains were drawn open again to let sunlight flood the rooms. The staff moved without tiptoeing, their laughter returning like birdsong after winter. The house, once suffocating, began to breathe. Sophia blossomed in that new air. Her steps grew steadier, her smile less fleeting. She spent mornings in the garden, tending roses she had once avoided. In the afternoons, she settled into the nursery, humming softly while folding baby clothes, her hands no longer trembling. Marcus often lingered at the doorway just to watch her, memorizing every curve of her smile, every sparkle of hope returning to her eyes. One evening, as the sky burned orange, Marcus joined her in the nursery. The crib stood finished now, painted a soft ivory, sunlight spilling across the polished wood. Sophia's hand rested on her belly, the faintest kick stirring beneath her palm. She looked up at Marcus, eyes shimmering. "He's strong," she whispered. Marcus placed his hand over hers, feeling the flutter of life. His chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with awe. "Like his mother," he said. Tears glistened at the corners of Sophia's eyes, but they weren't from sadness. "Do you think he'll understand? That love is stronger than the hate he might see in the world." Marcus kissed her forehead, his voice steady. "He'll know, because we'll show him. He'll grow up in a home filled with love, not fear. And he'll know that his mother is the bravest woman I've ever met." Sophia smiled, leaning into him. In that moment, Marcus knew he had made the only choice that mattered. The day finally came. The hospital room glowed with sterile light, but all Marcus saw was Sophia, her face radiant despite exhaustion, her arms cradling a newborn swaddled in soft blue. The baby's cries filled the air, sharp and alive, a sound that pierced through every shadow that had haunted them. Marcus's throat tightened as he reached out, touching the tiny fingers that curled instinctively around his. "Welcome to the world, little one," he whispered. Sophia's smile was tired but full. "He's safe," she said, her voice breaking on the word. Marcus nodded, his vision blurring. "He always will be." Back at the mansion, the nursery no longer felt unfinished. Sunlight danced across the walls, illuminating shelves lined with storybooks and stuffed animals. The crib stood ready, the baby's breath soft and steady. Sophia sat in the rocking chair, humming a lullaby, her face peaceful in a way Marcus hadn't seen in months. He stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders, drinking in the scene. The home was no longer a battlefield. It was theirs, finally safe, finally free. Outside, neighbors still whispered, some with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with lingering judgment. But Marcus no longer cared. His world wasn't measured by their opinions anymore. His wealth wasn't in the numbers flashing across stock screens. It was here, in the quiet rise and fall of his son's chest, in Sophia's laughter slowly blooming again, in the fragile but undeniable peace they had fought for. One night, as Marcus tucked the baby into the crib, he glanced at the family portrait still hanging in the hall. His parents, himself in his youth, Eleanor's smile polished and perfect. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, he lifted it from the wall. The glass caught the light as he carried it to the storage room and set it face down, never to hang again. Some ties weren't meant to mend. Some legacies weren't meant to be carried forward. Back in the nursery, Marcus sat beside Sophia, watching their child sleep. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. Love stronger than legacy, he murmured. Sophia turned to him, her smile soft and sure. Love stronger than hate. And in that quiet room, with the baby's breath steady and the night finally calm, Marcus felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile peace of silence, but the real kind, born of truth, sacrifice, and choice. Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in boardrooms or on city streets. They're fought in our own homes, against the shadows we inherit, against the blood that betrays us. And sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do is to stand against his own family so the family he chooses can finally live in peace. Marcus kissed Sophia's hand, his voice a vow. This is our legacy now, and with that, the Johnson mansion once heavy with cruelty was filled instead with the gentle sound of new life, of love chosen, of a future unbroken.